All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Eric Zinger. I'm here for tonight's Hartsdale Neighbors Association sponsored candidates night for the Hartsdale Fire Department. I'm very grateful to be joined by both Jason Muldoon and John Vallarelli. Um, as everyone should know, we have an upcoming election for two open seats on the Hartsdale Fire Commissioners Board. That election will be held on Tuesday, December 12th from 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. and voting is at the firehouse on Central Avenue. So not the one on West Hartsdale, but on Central Avenue. There's no absentee ballots or anything like that, so you must vote in person. And the election again, Tuesday, December 12th, 1 week from tonight, from 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. And there'll be two open seats. Jason Muldoon, current chair of the Fire Commission, his term is expired, and he's submitted a petition for that seat, which is a 5-year term. And John Vallarelli, who was recently appointed to fill a position by a commissioner who resigned, he was appointed by the board to fill out the remainder of the year, and he is running for the remaining 2 years on his open position. So just setting the stage a little bit for the night, these are the only two declared candidates, but it's still very important to make sure to come out and vote regardless for that election. So Jason, John, thank you very much for joining. I'll start by giving each of you guys a couple of minutes to introduce yourselves, tell us who you are, tell us why you're running, and we'll go from there. So John, do you want to start us off?
Sure. I'm John Vallarelli, and I'm currently an appointed fire commissioner running for the 2 years. My experience was 31 years in the MTA police, where I retired in 2021 as a captain. And I've got a huge breadth of administrative and fiscal experience and programmatic experience in that role that I handled, along with leadership within in the agency. My history also includes I was a dispatcher for Westchester County, both at the county police and at the fire control center. And previous to that, I was had a small business that we operated in a family affair. So that's basically my go around. And my hope is just to bring my skill sets to the board and to the benefit of the fire district and the residents of the district and the firefighters and officers that make up the Hartsdale Fire District.
Okay, thanks, John.
Thank you.
Jason, if you want to take a minute or two to introduce yourself, tell us why you're running, and all that kind of stuff. You're on mute, just to give you a heads up.
Feel like I'm at work. You're on
You
mute.
are at work.
This isn't work. Thanks, Eric. I appreciate the time. And for everyone who is on at the moment and everyone who's going to watch this on playback, thank you for taking the time to come and listen to John and I. My name is Jason Muldoon. I have served on the board of the Hartsdale Fire District for 5 years. I have no experience whatsoever in the fire service. Came in very, very green and spent really the first year to two listening and learning about how the fire service works. My background is technology operations and project management. And I found ways to use that experience over the course of the 5 years. Personally, one of the reasons that attracted me to this and kind of why I want to run again, I do believe that firefighters are the backbone of our community's safety. They're kind of not really just firefighters anymore. Fire departments have grown and changed and evolved over time. There are really emergency service units like who are there when you need them most, when it's your worst day. But I do also recognize the importance of controlling costs without compromising the quality of the services that the department provides. And that's something that I will work on over the next 5 years if I'm elected again, really exploring cost-saving measures that don't jeopardize the safety and the well-being of our community or our firefighters. Smart fiscal practices, not just a campaign promise, but really a commitment from myself and I know from the other board members to make sure that we can find solutions that allow us to maintain the level of service that we have today without putting additional undue strain on our community's finances. People talk about efficiency. our budget's pretty tight, but like anywhere, even my house here, I mean, we run a pretty tight house. But there's always opportunities and ways that you can make things more efficient. You can get more out of your time and out of your money. But I do also believe, and we'll probably get to that soon, Eric, that the bigger changes, real material change, is harder to come by, and it's going to require us on the board of the district working with a broader range of people over the course of the next few years, and not just going into our meeting room at the fire station and working amongst ourselves. I think there's bigger challenges down the road, and we're going to have to branch out.
Okay, thank you, Jason. So for everyone who is here watching this live, if you do have a question that you'd like to ask either both or one of the candidates, please use the raise hand feature under reactions, and we'll go ahead and call on people as they come up. So if you are interested in asking a question, please just go ahead and use that. I'll start the questions off, and either one of you feel free to go ahead and take this, but I'd like to know kind of what you see as maybe one, two, or three, however many you want to say, big priorities for either the next 5 years or 2 years, things that you guys are thinking about, that are either outside the box that could potentially replace the ballot proposal that was voted down next year. Some things that you guys are thinking about that would either be new, different, change, big, what you're most excited to work on. Get us a little bit into some of the weeds or the details here. Anything that you'd like to specifically focus on. So whoever would like to go first. John, you're on mute.
Off mute. Okay,
there we go.
I'm off mute. One of the first things I want to look at is, I think, is a 20-year plan, a capital plan. And in that, it helps to project, and Jason's done a really good job of laying out the next go round for apparatus replacement, but we've got so much more in materials. And that really leads to the point of identifying things that in the department that are going to have to be targeted out and looked at from a budget perspective. And one of those is, current Station 1. It is an older facility. We are, putting in funds to try to keep things going. But at some point, and maybe this can be tied to if that Four Corners plan ever goes through, maybe a little horse trading that we can do with the town, provisioning space at another location to replace Station 1. But the concepts of just trying to put everybody up in Station 2, I think, is counterproductive to response time, because if you look at the calls that are received by the department, there's a bunch of them that run along that Hartsdale Avenue, West Hartsdale Avenue, East Hartsdale Avenue, and Central Avenue corridor. It's a heavy populated, so it runs a good portion of the calls for service, and the response time, as we knew from personally affected us, trying to get within that 4 or 5 minutes. They've been very good at it. So, that's one thing that I'd really like to look at, because and the other thing is, and this gets to the fiscal end of things. We have a very, I'd say, a good size operating budget. And in it, I think that the current systems that we use aren't modern. They're not productive to oversight and management. There's a lot of hard effort that has to be done currently to put the finances together. And I think we've got to find systems that are out there that can make the systems work so much better and more efficiently. Because at that point, we can get a better idea on a month-to-month basis of the actual costs and have better oversight, instead of having to wait to a meeting and show up and have everything in front of us at one time. So that's one of the other things I'd like to do. Third thing is, one thing I did is I had about 17 years in a volunteer fire service, so I'm very aware of mutual aid. And what I'm bothered by is that we've got an increase of calls for the department, yet the department is at the state of the amount of firefighters and apparatus that we've had for a certain period of time. And there's a heavy reliance to meet the NFPA requirements, that we're at only, I think, about 41% of the staffing levels for medium range fires. So we're constantly relying on our partner agencies in the other districts, Greenville, Fairview, Scarsdale, for first due backup. Now that's a tax and that's a burden on those communities the same way we go and do it. And I think the mutual aid system in the county hasn't been reviewed, and it works well for us right now. But as the money gets tighter and there's less and less volunteers in the outer districts, the reliance is going to be on the career departments to respond to cover for those volunteer agencies because they can't turn people out anymore. And that's a nationwide trend that is very, very bad for the fire service that we haven't been really impacted by because of the career staff. So those are a couple of the things that come to mind that are things I'd really like to get myself grounded and start the process of looking at it.
Thanks, John. Jason?
Yeah, John's got all the lingo and the acronyms because he was part of the emergency services. I don't have any of that, so I'm just going to use regular words. Sorry, John.
That's okay.
It's really challenging, to be sitting on the board of a fire district and to have the health and well-being of the community, and the health and well-being of firefighters as our top priority, and then to have people be complaining about fire taxes. And look, I'm not saying like we couldn't do a better job. I pay my fire taxes. It amounts to a car payment every year. I'd love for it to be less. But when I look at the budget and I look at like what our commitments are out of, I have it here, unfortunately, obviously I'm not going to share it on the screen, but if we think about for 2024, there's probably 85% of the budget is tied up in, non-discretionary spending. So the thought of going in and just like slashing costs, like that's the operating budget. That's essential money to how the fire department runs. I think we as a board, we have to start going a little bit outside of our comfort zone. The fire district, generates revenue through primarily one means, and that is taxes. We get a little bit of money every month by renting out space on our radio mast behind Station 2 on West Hartsdale Avenue. And we do we do apply for and get grants from time to time. But taxes are our primary source of revenue. And we're wholly reliant on the town's assessment, the town bringing in more businesses to add to the income, the tax income, enabling property developers to build single family homes, because remember, condos only pay 60% of their assessed value, the equivalent of that in taxes. They're not paying the 100%. I think we have to partner with outside groups to make sure that we're working with the town, exploring opportunities. We're working with local politicians, taking advantage of grants and other sources of income, and possibly even leaning towards the legislative end of things, to open up other sources of revenue. For example, again, I don't know if this is legal or not right now, but we may need to go the legislative route. But can we charge for some services? Certainly wouldn't propose charging for fire call-outs or EMT call-outs, but think about, the fire department does building inspections, commercial building inspections. And if you have an entity that gets inspected and fails that first inspection, possibly, perhaps there's a good reason there to charge them for the second one. Charge them, and then kind of on an increasing scale, charge them for the third inspection. Those are the kind of things that we need to look at to open up our revenue streams. I think what's really important and what we haven't done, John kind of touched on it, and it's been discussed at the last couple of monthly meetings, is our staffing hasn't changed since I think 1970 something. But what I believe is important for us on the board to do is to make sure the service fits the community needs. Now, we've had people come in, or we've had suggestions of like, well, what about, volunteer departments and stuff like that. And I think what we have to do is, you can't pick a solution. You can't say, oh, we have to be a volunteer department. Because to me, you're picking the solution and then you're trying to make the solution fit to a problem. I think you have to understand the problem that you have. What is our community now? Our community's changed in 50 years. What's our demographic? What kind of calls are we getting? And we have all this data. It's readily available to us. And we really have to sit down and analyze it and look at, what does the community need in terms of our service? Like I said, we're no longer just the fire department. I mean, these guys respond to flood calls, EMT calls, car crashes, people getting stuck, falling on bridges. There's a whole slew of different areas that the department gets called out to, and responds quickly and responds expertly. And, if I was having a bad day, there's nobody else I would want coming to my door than some of these guys. But I do think it's important for us to go back and do the analysis and figure out, what does our community look like today? What is the problem that we're trying to solve, and make sure our service fits that problem before we start going down the road of, opening new stations, closing stations, consolidating, any of those other solutions that have been out there. They're all levers that we can pull, but we need to know what that problem is first. I'm going to stop there.
All right, thanks, Jason. Again, if anyone has a question, please go ahead and use the raise hand feature. If you're not sure how to do that, just type it in the chat. We can go ahead and unmute you.
Sorry, there was one other thing in the back of my mind, and it just jumped to the front again. Sorry. In terms of the station, just to go back to the ballot that was we put out there last year, I'm gonna readily, I mean, it's public record, I voted in favor of putting that motion forward to the public and putting that out there for a public vote, to purchase that plot of land behind the current Station 1. I do think, the board and the chief had the best interest of the community in mind when we did that. And for whatever, we just didn't go about it the right way, and the community didn't believe in us, and fair enough, we hold our hands up. That was our bad. But there are other opportunities. We're a small district. We got to look at the data. Where do our calls go? Where's our apparatus run on a day-to-day basis? People talk about, not having a problem consolidating into Station 2 on West Hartsdale Avenue. But I think we have to, we have to hold ourselves accountable. We have to dig it to the next level. Like, the argument is, oh, it's going to change response times. Okay, sure, I agree with that. West Hartsdale Avenue is a beast sometimes. But has anyone talked to the county or the state about getting access to the traffic light control systems? So when fire engines have to run up or down West Hartsdale Avenue, we can influence the lights at Four Corners to let traffic flow more easily. Those are the kind of things. I'm not saying that's what we want to do. What I'm saying is, those are the lengths that we should be going to in analyzing these problems, and making sure that when the community comes back to us and says, why haven't you done this? We can say, well, we have, and here's the reasons. We've done our analysis, or we've done our analysis and we do think it's a good idea because X, Y, and Z. And maybe we haven't done that in the past. Maybe we've been a little bit lackadaisical about the lengths that we've gone to in analyzing some of these options. And I think with some of the folks on the board that are on the board today, I think there's a little bit more of an appetite for digging into that level going forward. Now I'm going to stop.
Thanks, Jason. So again, if anyone does have a question, please go ahead and use the raise hand function or this call it out in the chat. But maybe I'll start because I'll continue until I see someone. John, Jason, feel free to go who first. What's one thing, doesn't have to be the biggest thing, but what's one misconception about either the commissioner's board or the fire department in general or the budget? What's one misconception that you think a lot of people have that you know would like to maybe talk about or address or talk about why that is? Jason, I see you've got your hand raised, so please
Sure.
go ahead.
I've heard it said that we're secretive. We're absolutely not secretive. First of all, we're governed by New York state law. We have absolutely no right in any way, shape, or form to be secretive about our information. There are certain things we cannot talk about in public. So I absolutely oppose that concept and that idea. However, I think we can do a better job of communicating to the community. We have monthly meetings, but I think we can go beyond just the monthly meeting and make sure we're getting information out. Now, we do have a couple of individuals in the department who handle social media channels, who handle our website. We definitely have fire prevention, I believe, and I sorry if I get this wrong. I believe it's Deputy Chief Musa Rafidi who's responsible for that, who's out in the community doing outreach, educating people. I believe they just had a bunch of meetings with some of the apartment buildings on East Hartsdale Avenue and High Point, but a little more information about the workings of the department and not just kind of what our firefighters are doing, because that's amazing work, but what's the board doing and the stuff that we can talk about. I think maybe there's opportunities there for us to communicate a little bit more information so people don't so people don't have that concept of they're being very secretive. There's things going on they're not telling us about. So that's something that we should take on to address, not the fault of the community, but something that I think the board can address.
And for anyone who's curious, those meetings are on the second Tuesday of every month at 7:30 p.m. At the firehouse on West Hartsdale Avenue. So if you're interested in, coming to one of those, 7:30, second Tuesday of every month. John,
Please.
is there maybe something,
So
a misconception that you'd like to talk about?
yeah, so one of the things I've lived in this community for as long as I was an officer of the MTAPD when I first met my wife. And now we're about 33 years. I always knew the fire department was here, and my aunt's brother was a career firefighter here in Hartsdale, and I knew of the agency, and I grew up in the Harrison Fire Department, so I've been on ladder trucks. I was a Tillerman, and I knew the whole place, but I was so caught up of working in the city all the time that I lost sight. And it wasn't until we had a crisis here at our house that I saw the guys actually work. I saw the firefighters, knew they were there, and I said, now it's time to get involved. But when I did, I came from an environment where we, in law enforcement, had a whole slew of courses we had to take, and we had to keep our certifications up. When I did interviews for the promotions, I was floored at the level of training and experience every one of these members has. And my love for these guys just exploded because I know the commitment that they put in. And I think the problem is, and having walked around and got some signatures throughout the neighborhood, was people know the fire department's there, but they don't use it. They don't have those emergencies, so they don't see the benefit that they get of this extremely professional department. And that is something I think needs to get out there. I've been touting this since I've been here. The story has got to get out to the public of who these people are. And in it, we can probably pick up what Jason said and talk about us. because it was one of who was one of our own members that turned around. We were talking about volunteers the last meeting, that there's no volunteers, and Alan said, "Excuse me, we're looking at 5 of them right there. The 5 of us on the board. We volunteer. We get no pay for this, and yet we do what we have to do to serve the community." And I think in totality, telling that story, getting that word out, I think is critically important, because as just as we move forward and we try to bring fundamental change in a world and an environment that is changing quickly for us, that this is something we're going to have to stay up on, because the costs are not going to get any lesser. They're going to become more. The calls will probably increase, especially as we get a more aging residents in Hartsdale. Those calls for service for EMS are going to increase exponentially. And I'll go back to what happened here at our house on 2 occasions. We waited for EMS from the PD to show up, and the fire department was here within 4 minutes. And they were doing what they had to do. The results were my mother-in-law, my wife, and my sister-in-law's mom passed. But that didn't mean that they didn't do 1,000%. And I watched them do this. I watched them at other 80 cases in the community, and I've seen them at fires. And I've been with the guys and rode out with them when they did their evolutions. They did their trainings, which again helped open my eyes to the difference in firefighting today versus what it was like for me back in the 70s and 80s. So it's a modern world. There's a huge responsibility on each of these members in a world that is spinning out of control right now. And the first people that anybody's going to look for is the fire department and the PD. And we have control and can, we can bring a lot of change that'd be beneficial to the residents, and I think to the rank and file that make up the department.
Thanks, John. Okay, again, if anyone does have a question, please feel free to jump in. Jason or John, maybe do you guys tell me, do you want to talk a little bit about the recent contract negotiations that occurred with both the regular firefighters and the officers? Is that something you'd like to share a little bit more information about? Because I know that those contracts were kind of overdue for a long time. So it's a big development. It's one of the biggest things that's been going on. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
We can both take.
Go first,
Jason, I'll let you go first because you negotiated.
All right. Okay. So I was on both negotiating committees. I was secondary on the initial one with the firefighters, and then lead on the officers. Well, sorry, I shouldn't say that. It was a partnership. It was Tony and I, and then Bob and I on the officers. There wasn't really a lead in the secondary. But here's my thing. I'm not going to go into the monetary details. Some of the records are obviously foilable. Can certainly go out and grab them. And the contract is a public record. Here's what struck me about this, and this to me was a huge learning lesson. And I'll caveat before I jump into it by saying I have nothing against unions. My wife works for New York City Department of Education. She's a member of the administrators union. She has all the benefits of a union backing her and her colleagues. And they've just gotten a new contract. So I fully understand what a union can bring. Here's what struck me most about it. The firefighters are members of a union, and they have a ton of resources at their disposal. They have hundreds of contract negotiations, data related to them, strategies, tactics, options that they could pull, ways that they can communicate, ask for, and ultimately receive things that they are looking for. huge set of resources. We as the commissioners have nothing. We went into that with essentially 5 people having a rough idea of what we were looking for, no historical information. We had an attorney on call that we could run things by, but I felt pretty much alone. So if anyone wants to send a virtual hug, please do. But I felt alone in that scenario. And that was really, really tough. And I think looking, because, those contracts expired, gosh, now I want to say the end of 2020. So this is, COVID came up, things got deferred for a little while. Some of the topics, made us drag on a little bit. And ultimately we got something in place, but they're coming up again in 2 years. Like the firefighters contract expires at the end of 2025. So, probably 24 months from now, hopefully we'll have gone through the process again and have a new one in place. But whoever's sitting on that negotiating committee, I really want to help them attack this in a slightly different way and to have more resources and be better prepared. Because I felt like, it was
outgunned.
Kind of, yeah. So I do think there's things that we should be doing as a board to prepare future negotiating committees on that challenge.
And I think the thing that I would probably, I don't want to, I think I'm speculating, but that's not a new thing. That's happened with every contract negotiation for the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And it's just continued to build on top of that.
Yeah. And go ahead, John.
So I've been a part of the collective bargaining with 2 major unions in my agency, one of the largest police, and we started out small, behind the 8 ball, and then they grew. So looking at the IAFF, the overriding union for the firefighters and the fire officers, it's one of the most formidable labor unions in the country. And to Jason's point, the resources that they bring to bear crush us. So from behind the 8 ball immediately are the commissioners, because few of us have been there to know how these things work and live through these negotiations. It's difficult, and it's tough because it's almost a full-time, when it comes up, it's almost a full-time effort, especially if you don't know the nuances of negotiating. So, the whole concept of collective bargaining is a give and take between both sides. And when there's tight budgets, there's not much to give and there's not much to take, because they're not going to, once they get that benefit, most unions never give that stuff up without something in return for it. And that's just historically in labor negotiations. So it's a difficult thing that we have to deal with, and it's a tall order. We have to get better. We've discussed it amongst ourselves about how to, receive better labor management kind of instruction from the perspective of the fire district's position. So, again, some of the things that we need to do is that being better prepared for it. But that also says, because contracts typically go 5 years, if we don't have continuity in the board members who continually do this, you could be running into that piece where you've got, Jason's finishing up 5, and then we're going to have another commissioner, and then I'm up in 2 years if I get elected. So we all have this limited time, and somebody's going to hit a contract. I mean, Jason did too, but he had two people, a current member and a former member, that he negotiated with. So there's the rarity, at least one of the two. But that doesn't mean that that second person was still here to help. And I think that changeover is a detriment to us when it comes to negotiation, because the union's here for 20 years, 20 plus, and they're not moving. We are.
Thanks, John. I think that raised a lot of good points there. So, maybe one last question as we kind of, wrap it up. And just a reminder to everyone, the election is next Tuesday, December 12th, 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. at the Hartsdale Fire Station on Central Avenue. Maybe one last question to wrap it up is, we look forward, and, Hartsdale is consistently viewed as, one of the best places to live for retirees. And there's always the potential for more assisted living homes in the area, some nonprofit homes. What challenges or how does the board kind of approach and Jason, you touched on it a little bit, but maybe we could, go on the changing demographics of the neighborhood, the changing service demands, the role of EMS response that the Hartsdale Fire Department plays, how potentially more assisted living could impact that. We've recently had the Chelsea come in and things like that. Talk to us about, the potential for changes in demographics, changes in assisted living, and what that can mean for us going forward.
The aged population, as I said earlier.
Sorry, hold on, John. I'm getting some other voices in the background. There, it looks like there's somebody off mute.
I'm not hearing anything.
Okay. All right, go ahead, John. Sorry.
Okay. The changing in the demographics and the addition of any other assisted living facilities is going to increase the amount of calls that we're going to have, not just for EMS, but
John, you're muted right now. Sorry about that. That was my fault. I was trying to mute someone else who was making that background noise. John, can you hear us? There we go.
Let me get out of it.
Yeah, sorry. I think we missed the last probably 30, 40 seconds of what you were saying there. I apologize.
John, you're still muted.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Nope, now you're off. Now you're back on again.
Okay. The changing demographics.
Yep.
That are people are getting more or getting older, requiring more EMS, but also in kind, the age of some of the houses and the facilities and the buildings are older also, and that increases the potential of fire down, probability of fire also, when you don't have newer construction to manage, that deals with a lot of these new fire suppression and systems that are being embedded. So they increase the challenges. The good thing about the department currently is that there's a commitment to the EMS training. So between first responder and EMT, they do an exceptional job of staying up certified to be able to do the responses. And I would be interested not at our response, but to see what Greenberg's ambulance response is, not in a critical sense, but to see how their numbers have increased, because that tells a story. If they have an increase in their calls, that's going to be a delay in EMS response, because the best our guys are going to be able to do is initial assessments and packaging and being prepared to be able to be moved by EMS. So I think, working with another agency, the PD, would give that opportunity to look at those numbers as what we all, in a total response. The apparatus has been modernized. The crews are way ahead of the curve when it comes to the means of suppression and rescue. The rigs are extremely well set up for the future. So I don't see, again, they're going to do what they have to do. It's just at what point do we, and I go back to this mutual aid because it's a big issue with me, when we have to continually ask for an outside agency to come to support, to put enough firefighters on a given situation or back up, like happened in Scarsdale when they had that fire a couple of weeks ago over Thanksgiving. We're at the scene and then we got an engine at the scene and the engine's back in standby in their firehouse. So that's a case where Scarsdale's come to us and we're going to Scarsdale. Those boards are looking at the same thing we're looking at. How many times are we doing what we're doing? We ended up the crews did a phenomenal job going up to Yorktown to the bridge over and a rescue that was extremely difficult. And because of their training, they were masterful on it. So, they're set up extremely well in town between the three agencies for rescue response. Again, that's adding that value add to they're not a fire department anymore. They're an emergency services responder is really what they are, because they do everything. And I think that's just going to increase as the community changes and as we get older.
All right, Jason, anything to add on that, or?
I'd probably reiterate a few of the points John made. But I think the community outreach aspect, and I've hit on this a couple of times, is pretty big. Like if you think about some of these new buildings, they have fire suppression equipment in them, which is hugely beneficial to the population that lives in them. I'm thinking like condos up and down East Hartsdale Avenue. So that certainly helps control some emergency situations, but that doesn't stop fires or certainly doesn't stop fires from happening, starting and people getting hurt. I think, our fire prevention activity is very important, and the department does a really good job of reaching out and talking to the residents in the buildings, educating them, regular visits. We do a lot of building inspections, making sure things are working well within those areas. The department recently got that $500,000 grant to move everyone up to the EMT classification. Much better service when we get called out for medical emergencies. Our guys are super qualified. They can really deal with a lot of challenging situations, taking risks upon themselves as well, but very professional, excellent service provide back to the community. I think we need to. It goes back to what I think probably the first thing or second thing I said when I talked about like 3 challenges for the future is, what is our role? What is the department's role in this community? What does the community want from us? And in an aging population, there's going to be a lot of opportunities and a lot of areas where people need help and where the department can come in and fit. I always wonder why, when there's a medical call and we have 2 or 3 firefighters go out on a medical call, why we bring the fire truck. Why can't we go in the in the deputy's car or the captain's car? Why do we have to bring the truck and kind of put that extra wear and tear on the apparatus? And so, I've gotten some answers. Chief has given me some answers. A couple of the other firefighters have given me some information. I'd love to dig into that a little bit more. Is that something that maybe, there's opportunities to change in certain calls? Maybe the trucks don't roll.
Sounds like they weren't great answers.
Well, they made sense,
mm-hmm.
But like anything, sometimes I'm a dog with a bone and I'm not going to let go until I'm satisfied. And so I feel like there's just more digging to be done in a situation
Okay.
like can we adapt and change and maybe lengthen the life of our apparatus by doing so. There's a potential financial benefit there. Those apparatus take a beating, and as we learned recently, your engines are designed to operate at 55 miles an hour on a highway. That's their optimal range. And we drive the apparatus for 5 minutes or 6 minutes to a scene, and then they sit and idle for an hour, and then they drive back for 5 or 6 minutes. They never really get up to full operating temperature, and so that's caused a lot of wear and tear on them. So I think there's ways, we just have to understand what the community wants, where we fit in, and then there's ways for us to adapt how we respond to those incidents, maybe using our equipment, using our time, using our resources a little bit more efficiently. But again, we got to dig into that data. We really got to figure out where those opportunities are. I'm certainly not saying there's a lot of waste in the department. After 5 years, I know there's not. But like anything else, there's always ways to improve.
Thanks, Jason. And so just a reminder, the election is next week, 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. at the Firehouse on West Hartsdale Avenue. There's also, if anyone is interested in getting more involved, the monthly board meeting of the Hartsdale Fire Commissioners is on the second Tuesday of each month at 7:30 p.m. at the Firehouse on West Hartsdale Avenue. There is the meeting this December is on Wednesday, December 13th, because the election is on the 12th. So don't show up on the 12th next week at the Firehouse. That meeting will be on the 13th, Wednesday. So election on the 12th, Wednesday is the meeting, and then going forward, the second Tuesday of each month, 7:30 p.m. Going forward. I want to thank Jason and John for joining us tonight, for their time and attention, and one last reminder to everyone to please make sure to go out and vote. So thank you for joining. This video will be posted on the YouTube page. So if you weren't able to catch all of it, or you had to step away, or someone else who might be interested in taking a look, we'll make sure to make that available for you guys, and it will be on the YouTube page. So thank you again, everyone who came out tonight. Thank you, Jason and John, and everyone stay safe and have a good evening. Happy holiday season and all that good stuff.
Thank you, Eric, for hosting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.